Hi, this is Shane Starr, and today we're going to talk about self-improvement from an MBTI perspective. You can apply this to socionics through switching the functions around a little bit, but I'll probably do another one on socionics later, and I'm going to do one on Enneagram tomorrow. But for now, how do we improve our personalities and become better people from an MBTI point of view? So let's get into it. First function. If anything, we need to learn how to kind of roll our first functions back a little bit. I think we tend to overuse our first functions and we can become bulldozers with them. So I don't think there's a lot of cash value in working on your first function. I think that it is what it is and you're strong in it and you're going to use it. I think we should look elsewhere for your biggest move in self-improvement from an MBTI standpoint. What about our second function? Our second function, I think, is usually our best one because it's strong and we use it and we're good with it, but we are humble enough with it, cautious enough with it to know not to overuse it. So I think we have a good balance, at least most of us do, with our second function. Your lead function might be the thing you do most and the thing you have the most natural ability in. However, it's your creative function, your second function, your parent function in some systems. It's that second function that you're naturally the best at. So unless you're a very different kind of human being, your second function is not going to be an area of self-improvement for you. It's going to naturally probably be your most balanced overall best function. Okay, so we're not going to be looking at the second function today. What about, let's skip ahead to the fourth function, your inferior function. This might be debatable, but in one of my recent videos, a live video with Majestic INFJ, we talked about this, and he mentioned that he doesn't think it's the best use of one's time to really work on like a polar function, or I would say even the inferior function. Like, yes, you can put a little bit of time into that, and maybe we'll make another video about that at a later date, but chances are you're never going to be that good in it. It's always going to be a struggle. So when you think in MBTI terms of your fourth function, that's something to be aware of. It's something to, be, just have your attention on, so that like, hey, this is a weak spot for me. I know I don't do well with these kinds of things. Make sure I ask for help. Make sure I ask for advice, those kinds of things, because you're not going to ever turn your inferior function into a powerhouse like your lead or creative function. So I don't think turning all your attention to that is your best move. It might be a better move to set yourself up so that you don't have to face that inferior function that often. Okay, so without any further delay, the real cash value of self-improvement from an MBTI standpoint, at least according to my knowledge and reading and experience, is that third function. That is, the tertiary function, your third function. That is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, for lack of a better expression. And that's what we're going to get into a little bit deeper today. So another nice thing about this is if you look at the polar function, which is your third function inverted, by working on your third function, you kind of protect that polar function. And we'll see how that works as we move on. So let's jump into it at last after a 5-minute intro I wasn't exactly planning to have, but here we go. Tertiary functions, TE, which would be protecting polar TI. That's our ESFPs and ENFPs. The best way to work on your third function, TE, would be to really, like when it comes to work, that's where, like tertiary TE, you're going to be on a roller coaster. You're going to have your good days. You're going to have your bad days. I think it would do ENFPs and ESFPs well to slow down, learn the philosophy of doing things right the first time is actually quicker and faster than doing them fast and then having to go back and correct your mistakes later. You need to learn to ask for help more often. Thinking you have the general gist of it, which ENFPs tend to do from an NE perspective and ESFPs tend to do from an SE perspective. It's like, okay, yeah, I got it. Let me cook, let me get to it. And it's like, no, slow down. Actually, no, stop, ask for help, read the directions twice just to be extra careful and diligent, and do things step by step in a linear way. And then once you build enough muscle memory and enough skill in whatever it is you're doing or learning, then you can start to speed it up a little bit, as long as you keep the process smooth and you're doing well with it. But I also think it would help that to make a list of your mistakes and your wins. Now, a lot of people question that, like, that's unhealthy to list your mistakes, beating yourself up. I'm pretty good at that. But I think there's value in it because when you write the mistake down, you're kind of taking it out of yourself, putting it on paper. You can see it for what it is objectively instead of internalizing it and growing it into some unimaginable monster. And then you can get to work on those mistakes, and then you can also list the wins. Like, yeah, I messed this paperwork up this one day, and then a week later I was faced with the same situation and I got it right this time. So work out that TE, and in the process you'll be protecting your polar TI, because things you don't get you'll be asking for help with. You'll get you'll be reading directions carefully. What you don't know intuitively, you'll catch on with directions and practice. Okay, moving on. Tertiary SE, that's our ENTJs and our ENFJs. I think here, if you have tertiary SE, you're going to have flashes of brilliance and flashes of bad in there. And I think the key for these two types to improve that SE is to shake up your physical routine, or create a physical routine if you don't have one. I think most ENTJs and ENFJs I know, they work out with the best of them for about a month and then they drop off and then they start up again, or they have a healthy habit that they do for a while and then they quit, or they let it go. That's not good. Like, check in with yourself. Ask yourself, what's missing in my life from a physical standpoint, and start that new habit, start that new hobby. Give yourself 30 days to let it kind of cement into a habit, 90 days for a real habit, and track your progress. Stick with it. I think that would be the best way to improve someone's SE, who has it in the tertiary spot. Take a close look at your physical routine. Ask, what could I do to shake things up? What could I do to improve things a little bit? And, have fun with it. Enjoy yourself. Get out there. And in so doing, you'll be inadvertently focusing on your overall body and your health, therefore protecting that polar SI. So, you'll be getting two birds with one stone that way. All right, moving on to tertiary NE, extroverted intuition. That's our ESTJs and ESFJs. And I'd say here, these two types struggle with their ultimate goals. I think what they need to do to work on that tertiary NE is to dive into some different options. List your options. Whether it's in your home, your car you drive, your career, your relationship, or friendships. Look at all your options. Ask yourself, what am I doing? Where am I going with this? Is this the best route to take? List your options and list your desires, your goals, not just your options in a black and white sense, but ask yourself, what do I really want out of this? And what's the end game here? What's the overall plan? And doing it from an exploration of options. I don't want you jumping straight into your NI, but by listing all the options, just having them on paper, having a list, going through them, doing that mental exercise of going through these options in your mind, that will indeed affect your polar NI and help you get on track, help you get some more meaning in your life. These two types tend to be busybodies, either in the physical realm, workplace realm, or social realm. This will give them some sort of meaning behind that. But you can't just jump to one thing right away. You have to consider all the options first, and that's what you're decent at with that tertiary NE, and then narrow it down and go with a plan from there, which will protect that polar NI. Okay, moving on. Tertiary FE. These are our ESTPs and ENTPs. And then, of course, they have polar FI. It's real simple with these types. One quick, easy piece of advice that will make all the difference in your world. And that's simply to be a better listener. Listen better. People just want to be heard, especially one of the genders. They'd almost rather be heard, not almost, they would rather be heard than have their problems fixed. That's still tough for me to accept, but it is what it is. Be a better listener. Offer to help people where it's needed, not just your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or, necessarily, relationship, but, people at work, people you come across, people in line, someone behind you with one thing, you have 15 or 16 things. Ask them if they want to go ahead of you. Ask people, if they need anything from you. Offer help to the world where needed. Exercise the golden rule. Be, if you're religious, be a good example of your religious faith. If you're not religious, be the best person you can be for whatever reasons you have to facilitate that goal. But in being better situationally and trying to really offer whatever social group you're involved in, whether at work or at home or with friends or just out in public, that's going to help you be better at FI naturally. And even though that polar FI will always be there, you protect it by being good with your FE. So practice that FE, be a better listener, practice the golden rule, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. And, just be a helpful person. That's FE, offering help to other people, but that translates real seamlessly into FI, which is, feeling whole and feeling good and having that interconnectedness with the close people you want and need it with. All right, moving on. Tertiary TI, that's our INFJs and ISFJs. These people tend to be lifelong learners. They're tertiary TI. I know a lot of INFJs, not just a few, but a lot, who got into typology thinking they were INTPs because of that TI. What does TI do? TIs tend to be readers. They gain and acquire knowledge. If you can exercise that TI by reading how-to books. People make fun of this or that for dummies. Before I had my religious conversion to Catholicism, I read Catholicism for Dummies just to brush up on it. I knew some of it, from early life experiences and what I knew from college and just Christianity in general, but I really got into it by understanding what's behind some of the more controversial aspects of that faith, like things I was critical of. Now I got to understand them from a more in-depth perspective, which ultimately changed my perspective enough to join it. But that aside, it doesn't have to be religion or even philosophy. It can be gardening. It could be crossword puzzles just to keep your mind sharp. But for tertiary TI people, I think reading how-to books, like how-to in business, how-to in YouTube, I could probably use some how-to in YouTube. But anyway, you get the message. It's reading brochures, how-to things. It might seem a little bit boring, but increase your knowledge that way, and then you're protecting that polar TE that has difficulty managing real world tasks, because knowledge is power. When you know how to do a task inside and out, that's a lot shorter bridge to actually achieving it than it is if you just take building IKEA furniture, for example. Knowing the directions inside and out gets you a lot closer to your dresser drawer in your room set up with clothes in it than just looking at the box thinking, how am I going to get from A to Z here? INFJs and ISFJs are great readers. Their TI has a lot of potential. Use it, flex it, get it going, and I think reading is the best vehicle there. Aside from mental games and puzzles and stuff like that, that's how I would protect and make that TE polar an okay thing, because your TI is so strong it sort of covers up for it. Okay, moving on. Tertiary SI. These are INTPs and INFPs. And I feel like I know something about SI. I would say these are people, they need to ask themselves the big question in life: what is causing me discomfort in my life right now? It might be a relationship. It might be a job. It might be something happening at the gym or at the supermarket or at your child's school or at your school if you're still going to school. You have to ask yourself, where is the pain in my life? What is causing me discomfort? There's something wrong. What is it? Let me identify it. And then you can use that SI routine to fix it. You edit. I'm not going for wholesale change here like with a tertiary SE or something, or tertiary NE. I'm saying look at your routines and adjust them. Change gyms, change supermarkets, change your workout plan, change, hopefully it's not as bad as changing your relationship, but maybe you have to change something happening in your relationship, it's a bad habit or something. Ask yourself, what's causing me discomfort in my life and what do I do to change it? And in so doing, you'll also be protecting that polar SE, which doesn't like conflict, doesn't like force, doesn't like problems, doesn't like, a lot of hyperactivity. Change your routines using your strong tertiary SI to protect that vulnerable SE, so that you don't have to deal with bullies at school, or an unpleasant interaction with someone at the supermarket, or an unpleasant aspect of your relationship that's causing you trouble. Take a close look at your routines, and in this case, I wouldn't go for wholesale change. I would go for editing and revising those routines so that they start to work for you instead of against you. All right, next up, tertiary NI. That's our ISFPs and our ISTPs. And here we have people who, go along to get along in life, and they usually have their routines somewhat in place, but in an ironic way, sort of like their polar opposite ESFJs and ESTJ types, they tend to sometimes lack direction or meaning to it all. Not in the same way, of course, but whereas those people need to look at the available options and narrow one down, I think with ISFPs and ISTPs, what they need to do, they already have their thing, but they don't activate it. And so I would say for these types with tertiary NI, flex that NI by writing down some strategic future plans. What am I going to accomplish today? What am I going to accomplish this month or this quarter? Like I like to divide the year into quarters, winter, spring, summer, fall. Like that works for me. So what am I going to do this year? What am I going to do in the next 5 years? What's my long range plan for the next 10 years? Look at the pros and cons of each thing that you might be considering, and give yourself like a meaningful goal. Like this is what I'm doing now. This is what I hope to achieve today. This is what I hope to achieve in a month. This is where I hope to get to in a year or 5 years or 10 years, and keep those plans at the forefront of your life, whether it's through affirmations or lists of things to do where you have those longer range things on the bottom of the list. Whatever you need to do to focus on that will help guide you. That'll strengthen your personality as a whole, and at the same time it'll keep you open with perspectives to opportunities that might come, therefore protecting that vulnerable or polar NE. So if you have issues with what option do I go with, this is where you do the NI work to pare down the options that give you so much trouble with NE. So flex your NI, make some strategic plans, see what you need to do to execute those plans, write it down, and in so doing, the polar NE won't rear its head in your life as much as it has been. Okay, so that leaves one more, and that is tertiary FI. And how do we help with that to not only be better at it, but protect that polar FE? And I would say the big thing, and I've gotten this advice myself from my supervisor at work, but I think emotional regulation is a key concept for people with tertiary FI, and that's our ISTJs and INTJs. I think that noting your moods and how they affect yourself, your productivity, and not just yourself, but the people around you. Oftentimes we can think that we're in our own little world, and since we're not verbalizing our mood, it's not bringing anyone else down. When in fact we find out later that's not the case. Our moods do impact other people's lives close to us, and oftentimes in a negative way. So I think with tertiary FI, we need to work on our emotional regulation. Don't get too high when something goes well. Don't get too low when something goes bad. This too will pass. Take measure of your mood and others' moods and contribute in a positive way instead of letting your own personal status affect other people, especially in a negative way. In short, be nice. You're having a great day, then be nice. Share the love. You're having a bad day, be nice. Maybe someone else is having a better or a worse day than you. You never know when being nice when you don't feel like it gives you an opportunity you never considered before. And in so doing, you will be building the mood of the people around you, which protects that polar or vulnerable FE. You'll be contributing to the mood of the group just by regulating your own mood and working on how nice you are to the person right in front of you. All right, so that's my video for today. If you got this far, hope you enjoyed it. That's all I got. Peace out.